Hi everyone, it's Christina from Array and it's nice to virtually see you all. For those of you who don't know, Array is a full service Nanaimo based marketing agency and we've had the pleasure of being VIEA's web company for over 10 years. Like many of you, COVID has created challenges in the way we run our business along with changes. We're thrilled to be sponsoring this session about community challenges and opportunities that have emerged during this crazy time. We'd also love it if you came and said hi at our exhibitor booth via the virtual trade show. First and foremost, though, enjoy the session.
Good morning. Welcome to our panel on community challenges and opportunities. I'm Carrie Slavens. I'm Director of Engagement from the South Island Prosperity Partnership in Victoria. We're focused on economic prosperity, and it is my pleasure this morning to moderate this panel with Jocelyn Jenkins, City Manager for City of Victoria. Good morning, Jocelyn. Ted Swaby, Chief Administrative Officer, District Municipality of North Cowichan, and Deborah Sargent, City Manager, City of Campbell River.
Morning,
From how council meetings are held to how homelessness is addressed, communities across the nation have been forced to pivot to adapt to the pressures of COVID-19. And just like the people who live in our communities, each municipality, each community has its own personality, challenges, and opportunities. Well, a great deal of focus is always on the mayors and council. Today, we're talking with the professionals behind the scenes who are actually ensure our cities function the way they should beyond the political layer. So good morning. We're going to start with some individual presentations just so everybody can get a familiarity with our guests today and the communities that they represent. So I'm going to start with Jocelyn Jenkins, City Manager, City of Victoria. Hi, Jocelyn.
Morning. Thanks, Carrie. Yes, I'm City Manager here in the City of Victoria. We are the capital of British Columbia at the southern tip of Vancouver Island. Population of just over 92,000 these days. A very vibrant economy made up of IT, tourism, artists, makers, festivals, events, a very, very vibrant capital. And we've really enjoyed a very buoyant economy in the last 5 years. Tourism brings about $1.5 billion to our city. We had cruise ship visitation that was projected to be over 1 million passengers this year if it had gone ahead. We have a city that basically provides the backdrop to all of that activity. We also have a council who's very ambitious, taking on all kinds of big world challenges, climate leadership, mobility, zero waste, and then COVID hit. We also have, we've been dealing for a number of years with a homelessness challenge, crisis, an opioid crisis, and now COVID has kind of layered on top of that. So I think what we've really found since March is, where the city plays a key role in maintaining those services, those essential services to residents. And we've also had to be quite creative in terms of kind of keeping the machine of local government running. So maybe I'll just stop there for my kind of initial intro and pass it off to one of my colleagues to introduce their area next.
Okay, thanks so much, Jocelyn. Let's move to Ted Swaby, Chief Administrative Officer, District Municipality of North Cowichan.
Thanks, Carrie, and thanks, George, for inviting us to participate in this virtual conference. It's different, but it's much needed that we carry on. So I want to provide just a little bit of a context of our community for people, and then talk just briefly about the challenges in our organization, because they really do lead into the lessons learned during the pandemic. We were incorporated in 1871. We're a large municipality within the regional district, Cowichan Regional District. And our district municipality is approximately 200 square meters in size and has a population of approximately 30,000 people. We have infrastructure assets of over $1 billion to maintain, which is quite surprising for the size of our community, which includes several water systems and several sewer treatment facilities to facilitate the services needed. We have over 200 kilometers of road that we maintain. So we're almost like a regional district within a regional district. We're located 1 hour from Victoria and Nanaimo, which creates a growing commuting challenge for people coming in and out of our region and for goods and services. So North Cowichan is known as a community of communities, which includes the communities of Chemainus, Crofton, Maple Bay, Genoa Bay, and the South End, which is the area surrounding the city of Duncan. Each of these communities has its own identity and character, and we have a significant amount of ocean front within these communities and 2 large inland urban recreational lakes with an unbelievable wildlife marsh, which is the heart and lungs of a significant number of fish-bearing streams, including our very important Cowichan River. Our communities are connected with a vast amount of agricultural and rural land, adding to the uniqueness of our municipality's charm. And we have both large and small agricultural operations and a very large pulp mill in Crofton, and significant amount of service industry serving the community for various tourism activities throughout the region. So although our history is rich in logging and other resource extraction activities, our future is one of recreation and tourism support services. And this has been significantly impacted by the COVID issue. We have a growing number of wineries and restaurants that were the heart and soul of this recreation and tourism support services. We attract world-class sporting events and recently won the national bid to have Rowing Canada locate its national training center in Quamachin Lake. And every athlete you see at the Olympics next year in rowing was chosen from Rowing Canada's Quamachin Lake operations. We're also the starting leg of the BC bike race. And if you're a mountain biker, you know that we're a world class in this regard. We own 6 mountains comprised of 5,000 hectares of land, and we're part of the forest reserve that we use for annual harvesting and recreational purposes. And we have the infrastructure and stimulus from partners such as Rowing Canada and BC Bike to build a community pride and offers a new sector of economic growth through sports tourism. Adding to this, these assets, we have North Cowichan has 6 First Nations, which is very unique, including Cowichan Tribes, which is the largest First Nations in BC's. We're very rich in First Nations culture, and this adds an added complexity onto everything that we do related to our COVID response. North Cowichan has approximately 400 municipal employees with 4 fire halls, and we have one of the busiest mid-sized RCMP detachments in BC, which is soon to be a hub detachment for the region once our new detachment is constructed, which, by the way, we did a referendum for borrowing during the pandemic, which was quite unique. We also have a new hospital, new high school to be constructed in the next few years, along with potentially a new ferry terminal at Salt Spring and Crofton. Our organization is lean, and this really gets to the heart of the issue that we found. And staff structure, from a structural point of view, compared to like-sized municipalities, is very lean. And for years, we've been trying to catch up with community infrastructure investment. We've seen little investment into our modernizing the organization itself, and specifically not prioritizing investment in business continuity systems. This liability came home to roost with the pandemic when the pandemic hit, and is a significant lessons learned in the impacts of the pandemic. When the pandemic hit us, and like all municipalities, we're forced to reassess our safety practices and focus on delivering essential services while continuing the business of council. How do we support the business community, issue permits, deal with coming tax season, manage recreation facilities, et cetera, et cetera? The list is endless. And this, however, forced us to deal first with staff safety as the #1 priority, which meant our one safety employee was asked to completely rewrite procedures for everything that we would do as we restarted the complete service delivery to the community. So we shut down our recreational facilities and laid off 120 employees on March 16th. We struck a internal rapid response team to deal with staff issues. We opened a virtual regional emergency center to coordinate regional issues. And on March 18th, we closed Municipal Hall and canceled all meetings and public engagement processes. We invested $150,000 in a very short period of time on our infrastructure to install and train staff to work at home protocols. As noted already, we're significantly behind on systems of infrastructure investment. All of our council meetings and engagement processes were put on hold while we safely deployed staff for essential services and set up the remaining staff to work at home. On May 6th, Council approved plans to reintegrate engagement processes digitally for our OCP review, our forestry review, our climate action plan modeling review, and our significant sewer outfall project. These are enormous projects with a lot of community interest, and the pandemic really changed how we approach these.
Wow, that's a lot, Ted. And I'm going to ask you to deal more with these as we move through the conversations. So we're going to come back to you on that. And there's significant issues to talk about and significant lessons learned. We're going to move to Deborah Sargent, City Manager from the City of Campbell River. And welcome, Deborah. Let's give you, I understand you have some slides to share.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I'm trust you can see the slides now.
Yes, we're good.
All right. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and to Jocelyn and Ted to share our experiences. I think is really important. I've taken a little bit of a different tact in terms of the introduction to the City of Campbell River. I want to talk briefly, of course, about our population. We're about 37,000. We're growing at about 1% a year. And our average age is 44. We're a very young community. We have a diversified economy, but much like the economy of North Cowichan, it's deeply rooted in our resource economy, particularly forestry, where we have twice as many employees as the provincial average in our forestry sector. And with aquaculture, I believe we have 3 or 4 times the provincial average for our community. We're a very accessible community. We have kilometers of open beachfront access, and we have a 28-kilometer loop trail that traverses across our oceanfront and as well through a beautiful forested area, the Beaver Lodge Lands, which is a legacy forest provided from the province to the city of Vancouver, or sorry, to the city of Campbell River. See, we have big city aspirations, but we have that small enough size that it's very friendly to newcomers and very welcoming to people from across Canada. We have exceptional geography, which I think is a blessing that many communities share on Vancouver Island. When I thought of how to introduce Campbell River in the context of challenges and opportunities in COVID, I've been with the city now for 5 years. I really wanted to talk about the people, the city, the people that have lived here for many years and the people that we are welcoming to our city in increasing numbers. And the one word that describes people in Campbell River and the way we approach challenges and opportunities is bootstrap or bootstrapping. And what is bootstrap? It's the technique of starting with existing resources to create something more complex and effective. And certainly we're doing that with our roots in forestry and aquaculture, and then combining that with health and education services, because we are the hub center for Mid-Island right up to the North Island. We have a high quality of life in Campbell River, and employment opportunities are attracting newcomers. ICE-T in their recent study talked about migrants across Canada increasingly voting with their feet, moving to smaller urban centers across Canada. And in fact, Campbell River is number 14 across Canada in attracting prime working age Canadians from larger urban centers to the city of Campbell River. So this got me to thinking about, well, who are these migrants and how are they changing our city, and how does that help us as we move through the changes and challenges in COVID? So I wanted to talk just very briefly, a short story about our Next Stream Tech competition, which has utilized the uniqueness of our community to bring opportunity to our area. Problem-solving opportunities aimed at strengthening Campbell River's economy. It's promoted interest in Campbell River as a technology destination. And it challenges people to invent in areas that are immediately relevant to the industries that I've already mentioned. It brings together the municipality with a local group of angel investors. It has drawn investors, inventors, and innovators from across Canada, and it connects our community members and business people to investors in a larger global community. So the Campbell River Angel Investors Group is a group that is formed. We have a community partnership with this group. Starting clockwise from the top of the slide there, Dana Kammersgaard hails from Colorado. He's a retired technology executive who has spent many years visiting in the Campbell River area and has purchased property here. David Barr to the right, who's a physicist and computer science who hails from Vancouver. He has extensive experience in intellectual property and is an inventor that he has over 25 granted patents. At the bottom circle, we have Andreas Hagen, who's actually born and raised in Campbell River, co-founder of iLab Solutions, a software as a service company, and currently the co-owner of Study Build with his wife, a rural design studio based in Quadra Island. And then to the left, we have Rick Segal, CEO of Poseidon Ocean Systems, and he also has an extensive tech background as founder of Fixmo and also a former executive of Samsung. So this group, in conjunction with the City of Campbell River Economic Development Officer, Rose Klukas, developed the Next Dream competition. We started this prior to the beginning of COVID, and we just announced the winners last month. And what's interesting, when you think of technology, people often think of computer applications, but technology and innovation shows up in surprising places. And in this case, it was as a byproduct of a fish processing plant on Quadra Island. Wild Isle Ferments was one of the winners. And that was in a wild card category where anything could be developed. We also had Portable Electric Vancouver, a very well-established, relatively new company that was working in portable electric modules, and they were challenged in this case to move to renewable energy sources. And as you can see, there's additional investment and interest in Campbell River generated from that. We've just announced our Next Dream 2.0, and the key thing with these competitions is very easy to apply. All you need is an idea, very accessible, and the categories are very open. And of course, as you see, health and emergency preparedness, very apropos with the challenges that we're finding with COVID. You know, one of the things that we found through COVID is the importance of local government and the role in providing that sense of community cohesion that now, and guidance through, you know, from a number of investors interested in locating here and getting involved with opportunities, but guiding them through to something like we have now and working side by side with the city. So I want to finish where I started, which is with the people of Campbell River. We are bootstrappers, a community of neighbors, helping neighbors and welcoming newcomers. We're tough, careful, caring community. As evidenced by our sea walk along our seafront, it's still bustling despite squalls and stormy weather. And we do get some mean sou'easters here in Campbell River. We are resourceful, resilient, and with respect to COVID, we believe we can weather this. So check us out on our social media platforms.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Deborah. Beautiful, beautiful part of the island. Actually, all of you represent the various regions of the island, and each has its own unique advantages. I know, and from your presentations, I can tell that you've all experienced significant disruption during COVID. And part of what we're going to explore in our moderated session is some of the challenges and lessons learned, because it's added an extra layer of complexity on top of what I know is already busy departments, busy jobs. Can we talk about that layer of complexity briefly and how you've dealt with it? And Jocelyn, maybe I'll start with you. How has COVID changed how you
Yeah,
approach?
I mean, I think our challenge, not unlike my colleagues, is that we have tried to just have business as usual as much as possible. That really tested our IT systems. We had just started to use Teams as the pandemic hit. We've totally embraced it now on all kinds of levels. A number of us have continued to come to the office. We can't have everybody back social distance, so we have about 125 people on at our City Hall campus. All of our 1,000 employees have continued to deliver services, whether you're frontline or in an office. That has been a huge amount of work for our health and safety folks, working with WorkSafe to have safety plans. When COVID hit, we shut everything down, and then we've had a gradual reopening. Places like the conference center are still not open. That's really due to business levels. Crystal Pool, we're having a renovation there. But it is very challenging, especially when you're continuing to advance land use applications, encouraging developers and community associations to engage virtually on applications. It has worked quite well, but I think there are still folks in the community that still want to do that face-to-face piece. So yeah, it has, there's an extraordinary burden for us with the sheltering in parks, on bylaw parks, public works, and that really has, it's not something we have control over, but it's certainly something that's greatly impacted us and will probably continue to impact us into 21. So yeah, it continues to be a challenge. I think the great thing coming out of it is really learning what you need and what you can live without. And I think that's something that's going to stand us in good stead for the future.
I think that's great, and it's worth noting. And I know every community here has their challenges. Victoria, of course, has been the epicenter on our island of the homelessness problems, lack of housing, and of course the opioid crisis. So it's really kind of a triple whammy, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it really is. And it does stem from, 16 years of not building housing. And so it's a catch up. There's a lot of good things in the works. The province has certainly done amazing work. But we've got a ways to go. And I would argue it's really a national crisis of needing homes for people. But yeah, we're continuing to work with our partners in that regard.
Great, thank you. So Ted, same question, lessons learned. I mean, what layers of complexity have COVID added? You touched on this a bit, but how has it affected North Cowichan?
Carrie, Jocelyn covered a lot of it, but what I would say is that with every issue, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the challenges we face really vary throughout those phases. And we're somewhere in the middle, I think now, or we're in the beginning of the middle. But certainly at the beginning of the pandemic, as a city manager, there was just so many inputs, and it was so fluid, and things were changing daily, if not multiple times a day, trying to manage things that came out of the medical health officer, or the interrelationship between the medical health officer's orders and WorkSafe, and then what procedures we could use. So early on, of course, we sent everyone home so that we could try and figure out what we're doing. And I often tell people that the product of a local government is service. We don't create widgets. And the only way we're going to provide that service is to have staff protect it and safe in how they do it. So there was this pause, and the anxiety of this pause of what we're going to do. And in North Cowichan, being so significantly underfunded for infrastructure, we had to immediately try and find a way to overcome the shortcomings of even an IT system and for our service delivery. And I have a quote actually from our chief information officer. He says, "Perceived barriers to change melts in the face of immovable objects," which I thought was kind of classic, because the amount of work that our human resources department and our IT department had to do at the very beginning was mind-boggling, just to get us back to ensuring that our staff are safe and that we can provide the essential services to the community, keep the water running, keep the toilets flushing, keep the roads open. And then the new challenges evolve as we move into how do we deliver application processing, because we don't have any way of doing that. And I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about that later. So I'll just leave it at that and let Deborah add some.
Now, Deborah, more towards the north end of the island, what challenges have you been experiencing? What complexity has COVID added?
Yeah, Carrie, very similar experience to, I think, Ted and Jocelyn, because we're all operating local governments. But I think one of the things that we realized right from the start was communications was a huge challenge. Communications internally with our own staff. Now you have a dispersed workforce, many working from home and in different locations. We had council originally attending council meetings via Teams from home. We've now brought council back into the council chambers, but still on a Teams platform so that we can invite other delegations, and also so that our staff can actually see what's happening and the decisions that are being made and the discussions that are happening. But we had to really step up our communication. We moved a lot into video formats. For myself to provide messages to our staff. The mayor and I immediately moved and are continuing to do weekly briefings with all of our radio stations about what is happening at the city, how we're impacted. Our finances, as all other cities, were immediately impacted with loss of revenues from gaming and our recreation services. And we own and manage the Campbell River Airport. And so loss of flights, activities, those sorts of things. So we immediately went into a series of meetings with our council on decisions that needed to be made financially as we looked at potentially the loss of $3 million from our annual revenue. And I think that has served us well, and that we dealt with those kinds of things head on. Our staff and of course the community, though, tremendous amount of need for information. Regular newsletters are going out, and news releases, and we decided to accept taxes at City Hall. So that was one of our first departments to open up. And that provided a lot of challenges for that group of employees who saw their fellow workers that were still working from home. And there's so much uncertainty. And I still find as a leader in any organization moving through COVID, you're dealing with a lot of free floating anxiety, because as you know, the beginning, the middle, and the end aren't as certain as they are in other issues that impact our municipality. So I think we're really prepared to weather the storm with a 10-year financial stability and resiliency plan that has a longer term horizon than a typical 5-year financial plan that a city has, but it's still very challenging. And I think challenging to deal with. It's such an interesting public health issue, because you're dealing with these massive issues of community health, and then you're bringing them right down to protocols for cleaning and sanitizing workstations. So it's very interesting in that respect, and many challenges.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something, talking about how cities, how revenue comes into a city. And the challenges of that, because I think a lot of people don't realize that you still have to deliver all of those services, even while less people are parking, less things are happening that can generate revenue. And I remember in the city of Victoria, suddenly when I lived downtown, parking suddenly was free.
Yeah.
And I wondered how the city, I was so thankful for that as a downtown resident. Yet I wondered about how the city was dealing with that. And I'm sure there's a lot of things about that go on behind the scenes that just help cities to function well, that the public aren't aware of. And I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the a bit more about behind the scenes issues that the public may not even consider that you're having to deal with, that people just take for granted. Jocelyn?
Yeah, well, I think I just the amount of person hours that have gone into making sure that people can access services safely. You know, I think we ran out of plexiglass in the city of Victoria at one point. But just the thought and consideration that goes into every touch point, how appointments are made. Deborah referenced, you know, her public service counter and the anxiety, huge levels of anxiety. I think we have gone to, we are continuing to have virtual public hearings. Our council has continued to meet in person in the chamber, but just all of the kind of backside of that, wrangling phone calls, making sure that people have access, working with applicants for their video presentations now for public hearings. There's just so much of that going on behind the scenes. And I think, you know, we don't know when this will be over, and we do feel like we're in this you know, holding pattern, but at the same time recognizing there are huge budget implications coming. We are probably looking at, you know, our local economy. Certainly we're trying to support, we have our Build Back Victoria program to try and keep people afloat, using public space to be able to provide food and beverage services and keep their restaurants going. But we know there's going to be an impact next year. And I think we're going to see a lot of assessments being appealed. And I think for Victoria, you know, the future implications of, you know, do you need to come to an office to go to work anymore? Our commercial development, you know, what the impact is going to look like there. So, you know, there's a lot of kind of behind the scenes conversations too about what is it going to look like. But yes, I think cities do so much to kind of maintain that composure and calm and continue to deliver the services. But it continues to be a challenge. Yeah.
Amazing. Yes. And you often make it look very easy. Ted, what about you? What about the behind the scenes things that you grapple with that the public may not be aware of that all go into making sure things function well?
Well, and no specific order, and trying to pick things maybe that Jocelyn didn't talk about yet. Just the sheer fact that we don't have 6 or 7 divisions at an organization that will be able to walk down and talk about an application or have meetings and talk about things. They're now dispersed in communities all over the island, and processing applications requires incredible fortitude and staff to be able to communicate. As Deborah talked about, communication becomes so important on how we actually get applications out the door after they had to be trained and learn how to use WebEx, which is the platform we use. And not everyone is as adept at using this kind of platform, and there's still lots of challenges. So the patience and the calm that you have to move through the digital world to actually just process applications. And the other thing I would note is that early on, especially when the province was requesting that we assist with enforcing the COVID rules, we were sending bylaw officers unknowingly, I guess at first, but very quickly understood, into situations that really put them at risk, because they had to actually knock on the door and talk to people and see how they're doing with their isolation. And I think that we forget in local government, like healthcare workers, kind of the essential services that we're providing them, the risk that we're taking to actually make our staff safe and protect the bylaws that the province wants us to protect. So I think that behind the scenes, the incredible work that we did with just procedures and health and safety issues is something the public never sees.
Yeah, absolutely. Deborah, and would you like to contribute to this?
Yeah, just to echo what Ted just spoken about, I think one of our employees early on asked if they would be receiving danger pay, because we were putting people in harm's way to deliver those really important community services. The only thing I wanted to touch on, I don't think that Jocelyn or Ted mentioned, is behind the scenes, municipalities have emergency operations centers to deal with emergencies. So on top of running the city, we were actually running an emergency operations center with the same staff. So people trying to do double duty. And we recognized very early, we had one of our infrastructure capital works manager as our planning section chief. He was doing an exceptional job, but he was putting aside our $28 million highway improvement project in order to do this. So we quickly switched out within the first couple of months to, allow him to carry on with that important capital work infrastructure. And I think the relationships that the city builds with its contractors during before COVID has really played out well, certainly for the city of Campbell River in terms of the delivery of our projects. Everyone paused for a moment, even on a $28 million improvement project. Our contractor had to think about, well, how can you continue with this new environment? And then very quickly worked with our city capital works manager to make sure that they could proceed safely. And I think it's really helpful for our community to see that although there was a pause, not everything stopped because of COVID. I mean, employment during this time is so critical. We're very fortunate. We have a very robust construction community here. And on the application side, I'll just add one of the complexities that we found is that we had to accept applications digitally. We'd never done that before, so we learned very quickly how to do that. And we hadn't previously accepted credit card payments. So something simple like that had to be worked through our whole finance department. And our construction is very fortunately booming during COVID. So we're very fortunate in that respect.
Carrie, I'd just add one interesting story. So we, like Deborah and Jocelyn with the development applications, when we finally decided to bring some staff back, and we finally decided that we would actually meet with a client, we had all the protocols in place. We got into a room, senior leaders were there, and we talked about the application. And 2 days later, we got a call from Island Health, who was doing contact tracing. And 3 of our senior staff, because of the exposure from that meeting, had to isolate for 7 days, I guess it was. Goodness. Now, the real bonus to that, so that just shows that no matter what you do, you still are exposed to the problem. The benefit is all the planning we did, they could work from home, and there was transparently no change to our service delivery. So it was just an interesting way that we had approached this and dealt with the problem.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I'm hearing a lot of lessons learned out of this. And one of the things that also I know has arisen in each one of your communities has been opportunities. And I know that there have been many, many examples within your offices and within your communities as a whole of innovation. I mean, this is really the upside is that innovation has been accelerated out of necessity. The downside, of course, is the human price that we pay. Jocelyn, can I ask you about innovation either within City Hall itself or what you've observed in the community? What has particularly stuck out for you?
Yeah, I mean, we tend to be a pretty collaborative community, even in the good times and the before times. But I think this has really brought us together in a way that everybody has kind of put down whatever agendas they thought they had to kind of keep everybody whole. So certainly an even closer bond between our retail, tourism, hospitality sectors. And then I think here at City Hall, I think we are just looking at a different way of doing business. We recognize that there's always just a heavy load of people in terms of work-life balance. We have a lot of new staff that are younger with young families. And I think, I think the legacy will be that some of those folks will continue to work in a different, more flexible way. I think, the burden still, I think, falls to many of our outside workers, the folks in parks, public works bylaw, because they have to be out there on the front lines day to day. But I think, you know, the way that technology has supported us through this and will continue to do that, I just think, yeah, I think we now know how to be able to pivot. We have had a challenge finding space for new employees. Now we're looking at a different kind of flexible workspace, kind of the new modern office approach, which will kind of save us money. The downside to all of that is that we have thousands of people in our downtown that support our local economies every day. The province is now sending people back, which is good. But you know, it's kind of almost rethinking what our downtown local economy looks like. But certainly we're all pulling in the same direction, which is I think a very what comes out of a crisis is kind of stronger bonds. So that's a good thing.
That's very good to hear. And Ted, what about you? Challenges, or sorry, opportunities, innovations?
So I have a couple that I'll mention. Like Deborah, we had no way to take in digital applications, and we very quickly realized early on that the construction industry was an industry that needed support because they weren't stopping, and they can't continue unless they have regulatory reviews and approvals. So our chief building inspector sat down with the IT department and completely wrote out and created a whole digital application process, requests for inspections, ways to do inspections, because you're throwing inspectors out into the real world with who knows who. And we are now fully automated in terms of our building inspections processes, which is fantastic. It's where we want it to be long-term anyway, and the pandemic has forced us to be there. So hats off to the chief building inspector for just taking the initiative and figuring out with IT how it can happen. And the other one was a bit of a pivot too, and an opportunity. We laid off our aquatic staff, and we knew we had a grant for a large renovation in addition to our aquatic center. And so we decided that rather than wait, bring them all back and then lay them off again and do the renovation, we would expedite it during COVID, which had its risks as well, just trying to get contractors. And we did the work well. Staff were laid off, and we did our annual maintenance. And we've now reopened, and we're phasing the reopen back to December. Will be fully open again with staff returning. So we just took that opportunity to actually do some work that otherwise we would have had to do anyway and lay off staff.
That's awesome. That kind of innovation, I mean, we're just seeing that all over, new ways of flexibility and thinking. Deborah, how about you in Campbell River?
I think if we've learned anything through the pandemic is that I think fortune favors the prepared, and a lot of the groundwork relationships that we had in place prior to the pandemic have really played off. And some of our forward thinking, we were looking to attract new tenants to our airport, and had prepared a subdivision, and we attracted Pell Aerospace, which is an international aeronautical surveillance company. During COVID, they've built their 12,000 square foot shop with, I think, 2,400 hours of work hours into it, and 6,000 square foot warehouse facility. And their business, it is not flying people, it's doing surveillance. So even though we have a lot of revenue reduction at our airport, thankfully to their operations, we have our own fueling facility. They are a regular user of our fuel facility, and that's worked out very well because of, and it wasn't easy for them to construct this, and we ran into lots of pitfalls during the construction, but you know, because of the strength of the relationship, we got them across the finish line, and that's really helping improve our revenues. The same happened with us with our homeless population. We have about 100 people estimated to be homeless. At the beginning of April, we had a massive apartment fire that left 100 people homeless in our community. But again, thanks to the strength of our relationship with BC Housing, they were able to come in and work with our own social planning staff to find new locations and for the displaced residents. They purchased a motel facility. They've also purchased, and this is BC Housing, purchased a downtown restaurant that was closing as a bridging facility, and that bridge to housing will be for our supportive housing facility 50 units, which we're just going to a ceremony. It will be a modular units. The foundation is already in place in the center of our community. So we're really fortunate to be able to pivot very quickly. Innovations that we've done in our economic development office include moving to a digital platform with Spring Consultants that really helped our business community understand how they needed to pivot and have a greater online presence. Particularly our retailers in our downtown area have been hit particularly hard, and just face-to-face interactions that we've been able to have. Our economic development office has used a combination of online meetups with face-to-face appointments to really talk businesses through, because there's such a range of supports out there. Very difficult for a business that's just trying to stay afloat to, be sure that they're getting the right information. So back again to communication, so important.
It's amazing. And, I want to thank you all for being here. There's so many questions I would love to ask you all, and we are unfortunately out of time for today. But thank you all for doing the hard, difficult work that really needs to be done and helping keep us all going and functioning during this crisis and beyond, and hopefully better days coming. So I just want to thank Ted Swaby, Chief Administrative Officer, District Municipality of North Cowichan, Jocelyn Jenkins, City Manager, City of Victoria, and Deborah Sargent, City Manager, City of Campbell River. I want to remind all of our viewers to put your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll be happy to answer them. Thanks for being with us today. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Carrie.
Hi, everybody. How are you? We're going to move into the question and answer section of our program right now. And so I'm going to throw some of them out. Some of them may be directed to individuals. Others we'll all tackle them from all sides. Are municipalities planning to increase property taxes in 2021 to cover unexpected expenditures related to COVID-19? Jocelyn, do you want to start with that? Jocelyn? Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you, Carrie. I can perhaps start if...
Please.
Yeah, in terms of property tax increases, the City of Campbell River has just gone through 2.5 days of deliberations on exactly that question. We decided to do our financial planning very early this year for the 2021 to 2030 budget deliberations because of COVID, and we really wanted to address some of those impacts as early as we could. So for the City of Campbell River, we're not planning to increase our property taxation rates over last year. Last year we were at 2.9%, and we haven't finalized our budget deliberations, but our early discussions indicate that we will be coming in at 2.85%. And in order to achieve that, we will have to be making some cost savings across the board that both temporary because of COVID and permanent, which will equate to approximately $1.5 million on an $80 million operating budget.
Oh, okay. Ted, can you speak to that?
Carrie, so like many municipalities in 2020, we hadn't adopted our financial plan when COVID hit, and council wanted to actually provide some relief in 2020. So we adopted a budget that with a much lower tax rate than we had proposed. And that for sure helped out in 2020, but creates more problems in future years. And so as we look at 2021, council adopted a COVID recovery type budget where they asked us to go out and make sure we phase our capital plan back in over a number of years, but also look for funding opportunities that can help with that phase in. So we are going to be back to a higher than normal tax rate for 2021, but that's yet to be determined because council hasn't received the financial plan. We're proposing one at this point that's a little higher than normal.
Right. Okay. And Jocelyn, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, Carrie. Thanks. Yeah, we are going to be going to council next week with our proposed budget. We had come back to council in the summer with a number of things that we determined could be deferred to 2021. I think we're going to be looking for further deferral. We're also looking at a number of different mitigation strategies. So I think a property tax increase is kind of our last resort. But also recognizing that we've got a base of commercial business in the city that's going to be having a very hard time going right into 21 and possibly into 22. So yeah, we're looking at everything we can internally in terms of capital budget deferment to be able to keep taxes low for next year.
Right. And am I correct in saying municipalities are not allowed to carry debt? Or you have to reconcile the budget every year, and so
a deficit, yeah.
A deficit, that makes it extra challenging, doesn't it? Largely property taxes, parking, where else do municipal revenues come from?
Well, in the case of Campbell River, we have revenues from our airport, which of course were severely impacted by COVID. We have a casino, so we have gaming revenues, which are considerable, and our recreation revenues. And of course, those were also very significantly impacted by COVID and a retraction of services occurred.
We have a question here. What new roles are municipalities considering to hire or expand in order to more effectively respond to the impact of pandemics or community emergencies? So we talk about how to manage deficits. Now we're talking about how to hire.
Yeah, I can start off if that's okay. One of the lessons learned for us, and we already knew it, but it really came home to roost, was we don't have a social planning function or enhanced community planning function. And so the request from the province to deal with the homeless situation, we were fortunate enough to have the Couch and Housing Society with John Horn, who's a social planner, and he took the lead. But we have identified that that's a shortcoming that we have on how we can manage our social disorder and our issues around that. And that's something that council looked at in 2020 and actually was considering whether they would hire a new community planner or social planner. And I'm sure that'll be back on the table in this budget year to talk about.
Okay. Does anybody else want to take that one on?
Yeah, for the city of Campbell River, there are two areas that we really noticed we needed more assistance with COVID, and one was communications. We have a single communications advisor who can normally manage a huge portfolio, but with all of the impacts of COVID, we felt we needed an additional resource that focused particularly on digital communications, websites, social media channels, video. We're doing a lot of video production because we can't have in-person meetings. And so in this budget, going into 2021, there will be an additional full-time digital communication assistant that we're adding to our complement. And then in economic development, we also felt there was a need to do a lot more work to assist our small business community that are most impacted, and to really be able to reach out to them effectively, both digitally and in person. And so we've added some additional resources to our economic development portfolio.
Okay, and Jocelyn.
Yeah, very similar to Ted and Deborah, recognizing the value of social planning. We're doing kind of an after action review of everything that we put through our emergency operations center, and we'll have lessons learned as we go forward. I think the only other thing I would add to that is recognizing that we have a lot of mental health and addictions playing out on our streets. And our council is very interested in looking at an alternate response. So working with the health authority to have more resources for folks who are mentally ill, not necessarily involved in criminal activity, but need that intervention on the street. So that's something that we're also looking at for 21 as well.
Right, because it must put huge pressure on the police and a number of different areas that, you know, that was not traditionally the areas that they were looking at, particularly in Victoria, I'm sure. We have a question here. Do you support the BC Chamber initiative to streamline the permitting process for building and development? Deborah, are you familiar with that?
Thank you. Yes, I am familiar with that. And I think there's value in streamlining on a regional basis. I'm not sure if there's value in streamlining across the province, only because the jurisdictions are very different from the mainland large city centers to a lot of mid and small size, but certainly for construction that's happening in a region or even island-wide, I could see that there is some definite benefit in having the process be similar.
Great.
One of the things I loved during the pandemic was that the province actually helped us with some forced streamlining by allowing us to adopt bylaws at one meeting. Public hearings took on a different flavor with people not attending in person. So application processing during the pandemic is an interesting test case on how you can change the application streamlining in a positive way if streamlining and quickness is what you want to achieve. But there's always a balance between those initiatives and other ones that you have in the community that council has to grapple with when they determine what the processing timelines are.
Okay. One of the panelists mentioned, this is a question from a viewer, mentioned fortune favors the prepared. In what way do you see partnerships with Indigenous governments contributing to this kind of preparedness? Jocelyn, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think even before the official Year of Reconciliation in 2017, I think we had established some very good relationships, especially with the Songhees and Esquimalt. I think those have just deepened. We have a city family, a very kind of organic function here at the city, comprised of members from the representatives from the bands, city staff, city councilors. And I think, you know, we are very, you know, we're getting more and more integrated in terms of economic development and really working very closely with them. So I think I'm not sure the pandemic kind of helped to send that forward any faster, but certainly I think that certainly is something that we've worked well on in the last couple of years. We're also down the road, it was supposed to be in 2020, which has now been deferred. We are looking at having an Indigenous function within the city to kind of bring that whole lens to everything that we do at City Hall.
Okay, great. Does anybody else want to address the First Nations question?
Carrie, I'd be happy to do that. The City of Campbell River, we're working on strengthening our relationships with our First Nations, VIEA, the VIEA, and the Homolko. And, you know, traditionally, those relationships have been around servicing agreements, nuts and bolts infrastructure. But now we're really expanding into areas of mutual interest and concern. We've been working on an urban Indigenous housing dialogue with the Lakwata community. And that's proved very beneficial in terms of our understanding of some of the housing needs in our community. We're also working with the chiefs of the VIEA and VIEA on important infrastructure connections from the inland highway and into our community center. And we have an agreement, at least in principle, to talk about how we can lobby the provincial government because our community is growing and we have the nations growing within our community and within their own communities. So I think, you know, I mentioned fortune favors the prepared. It's the relationships that it's the strength of the relationship that you start the dialogue with, and of course that you end the dialogue with. And so I think we can all say that it takes time to build these relationships, and often we start on small projects collaboratively, and in that way we can understand each other better. And I think we've been making some great progress in Campbell River.
That's great. Ted, anything from North Cowichan you'd like to add?
Absolutely. With 6 First Nations, with Snuneymuxw in the north and Cowichan tribes in the south, we have a mandate from council that we deeply engage and be sure that all our aspects of our operations are ones that we're talking to them about and finding ways to partnership with. First Nations, we have a large forestry operation where we harvest timber and recreate on 6 mountains. And we're right now in discussions with the Cowichan Nation to see how we can better partner in the future in our forest lands. And we have all sorts of engagement processes right now that are ongoing.
Okay. Well, we're coming to our final few minutes here, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank Deborah Sargent from Campbell River, Ted Swaby from North Cowichan, Jocelyn Jenkins from Victoria. Also, I would like to thank Array for sponsoring this session, and the panelists will all receive thank you gifts from the fabulous St. Jean's Cannery and Smokehouse. And those are great. And VIEA has done this just about every year that I can think of, and they're always very welcome. And I also want to remind you that you can join the roundtable, and if you'd like to deepen the conversation, this is a great chance to do it and talk with our panelists coming up at 11:30. So we will see you there, and thanks for joining us for this session.
Thank you.